projects. However, it is possible to actually find tactical projects that align with the typical hurdle rates that organizations are now increasingly demanding. And I found these sort of 25, 26 examples to be pretty interesting. So I threw all of these together from an Excel file that arose from this survey, just as a means of sharing some of these examples with you. So really across industry, across type of project, as you can see in the second column, we were able to identify select projects that were very rapidly delivered, so an average delivery time of 4.5 months, and were delivered using a total number of project resources of less than 6. And project resources span external SIs, Oracle Consulting, because these were all Oracle INAM customers, I might add. So this was a different sort of source of data from the previous survey that I showed previously. But yet, in spite of the tactical nature of these projects, and we can walk through one or two examples, a HR directory integration project, which is the third row on this slide, delivered over the course of 3 months using just 2 resources. Simply, in this case, integrating eBusiness Suite with Active Directory using 2 connectors from our identity provisioning offering. But across this sample, we were able to actually capture the subset of projects for which significant value was delivered. Forgive the layout of the slide. But in summary, we're able to reduce processing time, so time between commencement of process and completion of process by an average of 75% across these examples. Reduce product or increase productivity, in spite of the fact that many organizations don't take this into account anymore, significantly, but also reduce hard dollar or euro savings across the sample size for those projects that did capture the amount of cost that they took out or revenue that they were able to generate as a result of these INAM projects. So the summary here is, while this is not representative of the overall sorts of projects that we all have interactions with, it is possible to actually design extension to existing programs or commencement of new programs in a manner that allows you to generate significant returns in a measurable manner, yet do it with a reasonably small number of labor assets, and at the same time, between commencement of project and completion of project, have that lead time be reasonable, or at least in alignment with the requirements that your business increasingly has. So having shared the results of those 2 surveys with you, just as a means of establishing a foundation for the discussion, let's walk very quickly through a bit of a primer to the value that identity and access management services provide. And this is where I had some gremlins with my slides this morning, so do forgive me if there's any typos left in both of these slides. But in summary, we think about identity and access management services as consisting of 3 main categories: foundational identity storage and virtualization. So these are represented by the first 2 rows in this slide. Identity administration. So this is where you basically respond to any kind of routine business event, be it a rollout of a new version of SAP, the opening of a new office, hiring of an employee, engaging in some kind of M&A, and then determining the security administration events, be it at the identity layer or at the role layer that arises from those business events, and then executing those events accordingly across all managed resources, basically. And then moving on to the runtime access control category, that contains all of the capabilities that allow you to govern the policies by which users get access to resources, or web services can call resources irrespective of the sort of interaction that we're talking about. Ensure that that interaction is in conformance with internal security policy, with external regulations, with the relationships that you have with your trading partners, for example. And there's a whole series of foundational services, be it web access management, enterprise single sign-on, which is not shown in this slide, identity federation, adaptive access management, and increasingly important, entitlement management that provides those capabilities. What I find tremendously interesting across each of these services is, if one focuses on column 3, there is a number of common factors across all of these, and one of them is cost reduction, and another is cost avoidance. So fundamentally, the message that we find from summarizing the capability that INAM provides in this way is, irrespective of where you are in the adoption curve, it is possible to find a service encapsulated by a product, in this case we have products across the stack, but that really is not the key message. The key message is you can take where you are in the adoption curve of identity and access management determine what new incremental projects you can fund based on your internal hurdle rates for new project funding, figure out a way of staffing and delivering that project that aligns with the requirements of your business, but in almost every case be able to reduce cost or avoid costs or increase value in a measurable monetary manner to your business. I think that's the exciting thing about this part of the overall middleware product stack. Now, to talk in a bit more detail about some more detailed interviews that myself and my team were able to perform over the course of the last few weeks. What I was looking for was, particularly in industries that have been tremendously affected by the economic slowdown, how are those industries doing with their identity programs? Are they able to start new programs within this climate? Are they able to extend existing programs based on the increasing challenges that they're under? And what are the tricks and the tools and the best practices that they're using to ensure that they can continue to implement this tremendously important foundational service in spite of the prevalent economic context? So we performed a series of interviews, about 7 in total, spanning both Europe and North America, and I selected 2 that I felt were particularly worth highlighting with respect to the key conclusions that I wanted to make today. So first, a global investment bank that's primarily a UK-based financial organization, originally started in the business of providing retail banking to both consumers like myself as well as businesses. And then, like most other financial services organizations in the mid-80s, expanded into investment banking, so basically provision of brokerage services. And this specific case study focuses on the investment banking division of this global organization that provides, obviously, the full spectrum of services to corporate, government, and institutional clients. Needless to say, they have been tremendously affected by the financial crisis, really across innumerable dimensions. They're one of the few banks within the geography where they're incorporated that have not actually sought funding assistance from the government as yet, but it doesn't mean that their stock price has not been significantly affected. They went down by, I think, something like 91% over the course of 12 months, from January last year to January this year. I'm giving enough data that you can pretty much figure out whom they are. I don't have permission to use their name publicly as yet, but a very interesting organization. However, the challenges that they've been grappling with around the financial crisis, as is always the case, is a double-edged sword. Because on the one hand, significant pressure on their funding base as far as equity is concerned, reductions in overall IT staff, so that literally the size of the IT organization has gone down significantly. But they were able to actually acquire another tremendously distressed brokerage asset in the US as a result of the financial crisis at tremendously minimal cost. And we'll come back to this in a minute. But prior to the advent of the financial crisis, in a significant manner, they were able to commence a program very well thought out, spanning multiple years. The hurdle rate for investment wasn't quite that high, so the requirement from the audit committee of the board that they solve this problem was really what triggered the project in the first place. And if you can look at the quote at the bottom, beneath the sixth bullet, excuse me, there was a clear directive from the audit committee of the board in 2007, pre-commencement of the crisis, that they had to gain control over who has access to what. So that was what triggered the CFO to basically become the project sponsor for the overall identity program that gave rise to the selection of the Oracle tool and commencement of implementation in 2007. So they mapped, as is the case for most of these programs, they mapped what their estate looked like in terms of the provision of value across the organization. There's 32,000 employees, 100,000 external users that gain access to resources controlled by this investment banking organization. So in this case, trading partners, wholesale high-value customers accessing financial services through an online portal, which in turn needed to be protected, which in turn requires identity services in the back end, etc. And they also identified across the 400 systems or applications in the way they define applications, which of those were compliance critical. So were critical across all of the regulations that they needed to comply with, be that Sarbanes-Oxley, Gramm-Leach-Bliley. They're very, very active here in Europe, so Basel II also applied. But interestingly, the vast